Welcome to VoteProPot-Cast, the award-winning cannabis news podcast brought to you by VoteProPot.com. Here are your hosts, Phil Adams, Jay Britton, and Andrew McCreadies.
Welcome to VoteProPot-Cast. We have a special guest today and a good friend. He is the founder of the Pro Cannabis Media Group. He co-hosts several podcasts, video, such as We Talk Live, great show with Kurt Dalton, and we've had the great pleasure of being on that show. He hosts New Dabs, a news show, and he hosts In the Weeds. Jimmy Young, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much. Yeah, and in my spare time, I teach at a local college, so I'm always very busy and always producing content. And the nice thing about this industry, guys, is there's something new every day.
We find that because we do the news. Well, let's start with that. You have a background in sports broadcasting. Tell our listeners a little bit about your background and tell them how you transitioned from sports broadcasting into cannabis media. That's a hell of a transition.
I was going to say, how long is your show, really?
Yeah, 6 hours, man. 6 hours.
Yeah, well, I started producing sports in Boston at the NBC affiliate at age 20 when I was still a junior at Tufts University.
4 or 5 years ago.
That was 1977, guys, which was a long time ago. And I had I thought I thought I was going to be a teacher and coach when I went to college, and I had this opportunity at Channel 4 in Boston. So I decided to give this sportscasting thing a shot. And, 30 years later, an Emmy Award for a talk show that I created for kids, a sports talk show for kids that I created. I've had 4 Emmy nominations. I've had my own show for 6 years in the Boston market. I was a freelancer till 2009. And I have done a lot of amazing things. I'm very blessed to have covered Super Bowls and World Series, interviewed some of the biggest names in sports in the 80s and 90s. And now I am on the cannabis side of things, really just almost like by fluke. I got a medical card when the Massachusetts program first started back in 2013. Well, no, it had to be 2015. And I've had 4 major surgeries in 20 years. I used to be an athlete once. So I got thrown into the cannabis world by a friend who runs the CLNSmedia.com network. He needed a cannabis podcast. He thought that would be a great thing for his network. And he said for me to go down to the New England Cannabis Convention in March of 2018 and start a podcast. And back in the day, guys, I used to laugh at my friends who would walk around with microphones and cassette recorders at the hotels that the away teams used to stay at in the Boston area. And, oh, yeah, I interviewed O.J. Simpson. I interviewed Jerry West. And I used to laugh at them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I ended up getting paid to do it. And then here I am in
that's a hell of a motivator right there.
That's right. And in 2018, going back to the old days with it wasn't a cassette recorder. It was an iPhone and a microphone. And I met some very interesting people that first day. I'm still in touch with them. I found my sponsor for my podcast, In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. Mm-hmm. And you know what? It just kind of snowballed from there, to be honest. I realized that I was developing a following and said, gee, I wonder if we can do something beyond just this podcast, and started thinking about putting together a pro cannabis media group. And over the last 6 months, I've been able to do that. So
tell us about the pro cannabis media group, because it's really fascinating. You've got quite a few shows on there already, and tell our listeners what it is and what you project it to be.
Well, I tried to explain to people, if you can imagine what CBS or ABC or NBC was in their infancy, a network by definition is a group of stations. Well,
right.
Since we don't have stations anymore or channels, it's all internet sites. So it is a group of like-minded internet sites that are pro-cannabis. And that includes some of the biggest cannabis sites that are out there, Leafly, Weed Maps, Cannabis.net, which is Kurt Dalton's company, who is my co-host on Weed Talk. He has now got the 4th most popular cannabis website above High Times. So those are all based on Alexa rankings. But Kurt's done a great job, another Massachusetts guy, in building anything you need to know, everything you want to know about cannabis is on Cannabis.net. And he's been doing it now for 3.5 years. He's friends with Bruce Linton, the former ex-CEO of Canopy Growth. And we've had an opportunity to interview him among some of the other bigger names. I mean, it's pretty amazing. But I interviewed Tommy Chong last week, guys. And I guarantee you I may be the only person in America to have interviewed Tommy Chong, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson.
Yeah, no kidding.
I could go on and on about all this. Drew Bledsoe. I mean, I could go on and on and on. But I've had a very unique life, a blessed life in many, many ways. So I feel very fortunate. And the cannabis industry is fascinating in so many ways, but it's the people that are in the industry that are most fascinating to me. Right. Everybody is very passionate about this historic time in our development as a society and as a country.
Thank you for joining us for Vote Pro Podcast. If you enjoy the show, we'd love to hear from you. Send us your thoughts at VoteProPot.com/contact or send us an email at podcast@VoteProPot.com, and please give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to be part of the show, call our message line at 240-257-2441. Tell your friends about us and be sure to like, follow and share us on social media. Just go to Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn and Twitter and do a search for Vote Pro Pot. Now, back to the boys.
Okay, speaking of the Massachusetts legal market, tell us, how has the adult use market rollout, how has that gone? And how has it affected the medical program?
Well, there's about 63,000 medical patients, 56 or 67. I think it's 67,000 now. And as far as the market, well, I can tell you this. I'm about to open up this weekly thing on our news videos. We keep a score of the sales of adult use cannabis in the state since its inception. And that was almost a year ago, November 20th. So from November 20th, 2018 to November 20th, 2019, $364 million in adult use sales in the state of Massachusetts. The projections were over 400 million. So of course they've come under their expectations, but that has a lot to do with what's been going on up here in the last 6 months with the regulations and now the vape ban and sales being off 25% in most dispensaries over the last 2 or 3 months since they banned all the concentrates.
Mm-hmm. All the concentrates or just vapes?
All of the oil concentrates in the state, and that includes your e-cigarettes, that includes your THC-based medical cartridges, and all those vapes as well. They keep going back to court almost every week with a different lawsuit or a different injunction trying to overturn Governor Charlie Baker's, vape ban. Look, Charlie Baker has done everything he can to slow down the start of this business under his, jurisdiction, if you will, or his run here as governor.
Administration, yeah.
He's done a great job of slowing it down. I can tell you that. And he's pissed off a lot of people and he's put a lot of people out of business. I do not think what he did was the right way to do it, but who am I to say? I'm just an old sports guy with a whole bunch of opinions.
So have the recreational dispensaries, have they had an easy time getting opened? Or
no, not at all. Not at all. There's a total of 32 now in the state. They're averaging total gross sales every week in Massachusetts. Hasn't really changed much in the last 4 or 5 months if you just want to look at the numbers, even though they've had more dispensaries open. And, the novelty has definitely worn off. I do believe that the public is a little freaked about the vaping crisis. I think now that they have all these dispensaries in all these obscure towns all over Massachusetts, and they don't have really any open in the city of Boston. I mean, that still is the largest city. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right. That's crazy.
That's what you might call a market.
Exactly.
You would think. Yeah.
Why aren't there any dispensaries in Boston? Has the city banned dispensaries?
Great question. No, but the mayor is a recovering alcoholic. And he doesn't like substances, you know what I mean? And saw the damage it did to him and his family. So he says, you know what, I'm going to do everything I can to slow down the rollout. And now there's been kind of a citywide coup trying to get the power away from the mayor and get him to actually put an independent group together to handle his city. I mean, again, another level of bureaucracy to slow down the distribution of license. There is one guy, Pure Oasis in Boston, who has been given a license to start getting his act together, if you will, and start growing and all that neat stuff, or buying wholesale. And he's expected to open sometime before the end of the calendar year. But I mean, even when I talked to him in September, he had hoped to be open in October, and it's already November. You see what's going on here.
Yeah. So, and this kind of resistance is it seems like it's a lot of what's bogging people down in other areas. For example, there are probably millions of people out there who are ready to drop some serious investment money into cannabis stocks. I'm one. But we see these stocks and they just keep kind of going down, down, down. And there's got to be some ground floor opportunities here, but what do you see as kind of the impediments along with this kind of resistance, and what do we look for? What does an investor look for signs that maybe now's the time to get in?
Well, I think an investor should call me tomorrow and get on board with my media company. Go. How's that?
That'd be a good start.
Because we don't have to worry about licenses. We just have to talk about it. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. Same with us.
That's right.
That's right. So, first of all, let's talk about stocks. If you're playing in the stock world, you are prepared to watch your stock go up and down. And I don't care if it's in the cannabis arena or any of the other speculative markets that are out there in the stock.
Absolutely.
This industry hasn't even really launched in the United States yet. It's still a federally illegal substance. We all know that.
Yep.
The companies that have delved onto the public, into stocks are usually on that Canadian stock exchange, your Tilrays and your Canopies and all this, and they've been up and down. I think the nature of human beings is we want to get in early to get, the biggest bang for our buck. And I think the novelty has worn off a little bit. I think this vaping crisis thing has freaked a lot of people out.
Yeah.
And I think they are getting a little bit more wary about investing money in the cannabis space. But there's still a ton of money coming in every day. In fact, some money is being invested in some more mature companies out on the West Coast. I'm not going to name names, but they just got a $20 million infusion of capital, and they went to a subscription-only model. And they're, all of a sudden, they're losing their audience left and right. And, you can't underestimate the fact that this is a very early stage industry. Massachusetts is still one of 11, I believe, legal states now in the United States that has adult use cannabis. And so we've sold $364 million. Wow, that's amazing. It's a big number. Nobody's making money in this space right now. Okay. Right. The regulations are strangling, all these local dispensaries, whether they're adult use or even medical. And everybody's got taxes to pay. And, I just read that the federal government might be imposing a federal tax on cannabis in order to take it off controlled substances. So we got a long way to go. We've come a long way. A long way. Let's not, I cannot believe I lived to see the day that cannabis is legal in my home state. And, as well as becoming the greatest sports town in America, I just want to say.
It's a pretty good sports town. Pretty damn good sports town.
Well, DC's not doing too bad this year.
Yeah, that's right. We're holding
two
our
world
own.
Champions.
Yeah, the Mystics, the Capitals are kicking ass, and
how the Nationals do this year? I hear they did fairly good.
I'm very happy for the Nationals because my brother's a season ticket holder, and
there you go.
That's right. Even though he's a true Red Sox fan, the funny thing about my brother is how many people you know that were able to go to the 2 World Series in a row?
Wow,
with two different venues, one at Nats Park and the other at Fenway Park, and he did it. I got to go to Game 2 with my brother last year, which was just an awesome experience. And I've been, we had been to the 67 World Series, the 75 World Series, the 86 World Series.
All right.
The 2004 World Series. Okay, sorry. Did I stop?
In.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll stop.
Speaking of sports, how do you see cannabis affecting professional sports? I mean, is there a future for cannabis in sports?
Well, it's a great question because, I think that anybody who's a sports fan recognizes that in the 80s and 90s, it was truly the wild, wild west. And you saw a lot of performance enhancing drugs make their way into sports.
Really?
Beyond the power. Yeah, really. You didn't hear about that? Beyond the powerlifting, it went into the steroid era of baseball. And so the question really is cannabis, whether it has THC in it or not, as hemp, is it a performance enhancing drug, or is it a healing drug, or is it just a natural harmonious drug? I mean, there's so many applications for this plant in its relation to sport. I think it's great now that you're seeing a lot of athletes getting on board on the CBD front. You see Rob Gronkowski now,
right?
The great tight end for the Patriots, now endorsing CBD Medic, which is a Abacus health product. Oh, their CEO, Perry Antleman, and I were our friends, and he was on the last show I did. I just thought I'd throw that out there. And that being said, you see Paul Pierce involved. I saw Megan Rapinoe from the women's
the soccer team,
World Cup women's soccer team,
right,
involved with a CBD product now. It seems like every athlete's getting it. Mike Tyson's growing hemp, to fill, to feed his CBD appetite. I think at least what's happening is that is helping to build the fact that, this plant, it's pretty benign. If you just take away a couple of its chemicals and that intoxicating one, that THC one, and you make it an impotent plant, you call it hemp, we could grow this thing and build houses and replace a lot of the plastics that are out there. There's so much more ways to use the non-intoxicating part of that plant or the DNA-controlled impotence of the cannabis plant without THC.
Yeah, it really is an amazing plant. I mean, it's quite remarkable. And I think CBD seems like the kind of magic molecule that's the kind of the nose of the camel in the tent.
Oh, yeah, except until we get to CBN, guys. CBN is actually the anti-inflammatory component. It's incredible. It's just incredible to me that every day they find out another chemical, another molecule that makes up this weed. And this weed has been part of our culture for thousands of years. It was 80 years ago that the white man who controlled American business and politics, poured money into the Reefer Madness campaign and the starting of the DEA and Harry Anslinger and all that stuff that started and told the public and told the generation, this is an evil weed. And, all those people from that other country are bringing it into this country. And those people with a different color skin than ours are evil. And this was 1930.
And if you do it, you're a pot smoker and a bad person, and you should.
You're right.
Jail.
You're going to be a sex fiend too, man.
Right.
You better watch out for that, right? So they did that, and now what we're finding is, my God, that was a big lie, wasn't it? Oh, that was a government-backed propaganda campaign. And I had a great talk with a doctor, a cannabis specialist this week named Ryan Zacklin. And I threw this theory out at him, and I said, what if in 1937 they kept prohibition on alcohol and they allowed the medicine that was cannabis at that time and was being prescribed as medicine for people to flourish, to continue, so that they could have studied it over the last 80 years instead of vilified it. And then in 2016, we decided to vote in alcohol as an adult use product.
Yeah.
How tough a sell would that be in our world today, knowing that, here's a product. Oh, you know what? If you take too much of it, you could die, you know? You know what? You can take too much of this and you become an alcoholic too. Oh, yeah, but You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Absolutely.
And we're the government, and we're here to protect you from your own bad choices.
Right. Well, you know what, guys, we're all grown-up adults, at least some of us, and
Speak for yourself, but okay.
Everything in moderation. You know, I've never met a doctor who has ever said to me, "Stop smoking weed; it's going to kill you." Okay? It is anything in moderation is going to be okay. Just don't let it consume your life. I preach that to kids too. You know, everybody's so afraid about the kids. Oh, we got to keep it away from the kids. Well, they didn't keep it away from me when I was a kid. Here I am at age 62. I'm still waving the flag. I couldn't drink beer when I was in my teens, when everybody else was drinking around me. You know, back in the day, it was 18 in Massachusetts, the drinking age. I remember when you turned 15 or 16, you were getting into bars.
Right.
You were getting into bars. I was in bars at age 16.
Oh, same with us.
Had that long hair, hung out with older people, and, you know, we're getting into bars.
That's
so it's a whole new world, as you guys know.
You know, you mentioned a few minutes ago the vaping scare and how that's having an impact on the industry, which I believe it is. As you are aware, the CDC announced this week, in quotes, confirmed culprit of the issue is the vitamin E acetate. But I'm confused by that because we did a story just a couple weeks ago. The Mayo Clinic had done similar research on 17 patients, biopsies, and none of them had, and two of them were deceased. None of them had the vitamin E acetate. In fact, they claimed that it appeared to be some kind of a chemical burn. So what is going on with this? Have you interviewed anyone to give you some insight into this?
Oh yeah, every week I interview.
Same with us.
And now I've got a registered nurse alongside a cannabis expert and a cancer survivor through cannabis is now my co-anchor, Sherry Tutkus, on News Dabs, a weekly video that I do. And you know, I learn so much all the time from this, but it isn't. It's vitamin E. Don't cut your concentrate with bad stuff that you're not supposed to put in your lungs. Like vitamin E is in all those topicals, right? When you take a CBD topical and you look at the ingredients, you'll see vitamin E acetate in there. But you put it on your skin.
You're not putting it in your lungs.
Correct, Mundo. And this is the other thing. The doctors that I talk to that are cannabis experts are all saying, you know, it's okay to vape flower. Well, what I ask them is like, wait a second, it's okay to vape flower. Why? It's not combusting like the oils combust because of a temperature thing, and then you're putting a liquid into your lungs instead of a gas. I said, well, I don't get it. You know, I don't understand. They don't know enough now to. I think more than anything else, they're recognizing that most of these deaths and sicknesses are from the illicit market. And what does that tell you? That tells you that regulation in its infancy is not working right now.
Exactly.
Because they cannot compete in the open market right now because it's still cheaper to grow it yourself and sell it out your front door with nobody knowing than it is to, you know, go through the licensure process and, you know, takes you $1 million just to get to the starting line up here in Massachusetts, just to get through all the paperwork and stuff and the lawyers. And one of you guys asked me about investing, and I said, the only place you should invest in cannabis is with a law firm because the lawyers are going to get the most money out of it.
They always do, don't they?
Absolutely.
They're writing the laws. They're interpreting the laws. They're going to be challenging the laws. I mean, it's crazy. If I was starting out as a student and I decided I wanted to pick a field in law to go into, I think the cannabis industry would be a fascinating one to be part of because it's going to be, you know, if you're 22 to 28 years old and you're in law school now, that's a great field to go into because you're getting into it at the ground floor. You're going to learn all the different precedents that have been set. And there was a very interesting one set in Massachusetts recently. So there's all sorts of challenges now. And there's challenges to the baker's vape law too. You know, whether he went about it in the right way, you know, claiming it was a public health crisis. Well, guess what? The governor had to have public hearings before he declared that and had his wrist slapped, but the ban still stood. So that's where we're at up here.
Well, now you speak of a great field to go into. Turns out University of Maryland is the first in the nation with a graduate level cannabis course, and that's starting in the spring, I think. So now, from my perspective, and being the kind of resident conservative on this panel, this all kind of seems like a microcosm of capitalism. You know, people can see in real stark detail what overregulation does, what heavy taxation does. I mean, the levels of taxation on weed in California is so high that's why the black market and the gray market are flourishing as much as anything else. And what are your thoughts on that?
I'm agreeing 100% with you on that, and that therein lies the rub. Because, look, I'm happy that I don't have to meet somebody in a parking lot somewhere to get a bag of weed that'll last me, 6 months or a year or whatever. Right. But because I don't know what's in it. It's Colombian, right. It's Mexican, it's Maui Wowie, it's Panama Red, it's Acapulco Gold,
right? We're showing our age, Jimmy.
That's all right. I'm old. I admit it.
We all are. We're the
proud
same
of my age. God,
proud of it.
But I think that the whole point of regulation is to chart and keep track of this product from seed to sale, so that you know exactly what you're buying, where you bought it, how it was grown, what was put in it, has it been tested? I want that. Especially since we're really still talking about a medicine, guys.
Yeah.
Don't lose track of the fact that this is a medicine and a medicinal product that affects humans in a way that is different in each one of us. Because our own endocannabinoid systems that they just discovered after all these years, they kind of knew something was going on, but now they've identified it. Now they get the idea of its relationship with the neurotransmitters in our brain for building up our immune systems and all this stuff. We're finally understanding, finally studying it to recognize the power of this plant. I mean, it's so funny. I got to interview a Rastafarian in Jamaica about a month and a half ago. And the passion that this guy had for the plant and the soulfulness of it and how it was so ingrained in their culture and their soul. And I said, it sounds like you're talking about a living thing, aren't you? He goes, of course I am. And I talk to this living thing. They talk to the plant. And by the way, I know a lot of people out there that aren't Rastafarians that do talk to their plants in their house, okay? So that's not just a
absolutely.
Get it, right? So
there's nothing wrong with that, as long as the plants don't talk back.
That's when you really got to be concerned. Exactly right. I'm hearing voices, man, from the field, right?
Right.
Build it and they will come. Grow it and you'll get high,
Hey, Jimmy, let me ask you a question. If our listeners want to get a hold of you, how do they reach you on social media? Do you have a Twitter, LinkedIn?
You know what? Everything's under the Pro Cannabis Media name, Pro Cannabis Media so it's at Pro Cannabis Media on Twitter. It's at Pro Cannabis Media on Instagram. Our YouTube channel is Pro Cannabis Media. Although I will tell you guys, last week, I think we discovered that our friends at YouTube changed their policy about our Cannabis Talk programming. And you guys have known me for a little while. I don't like to talk so much about the different strains and the different ways to get high and all that stuff. I like to talk about the news, the information, the education, the chemistry, the science, the law, all the amazing ancillary issues around this. YouTube is now requiring us to click that box that says over 21 content or not.
I got the same notice. Yep.
Right. And I got to tell you, once again, this is an example of people not understanding what's going on. Yes, this is an adult product. Okay. I get it. It can be abused by adults. I get it. But until we educate our young people, all the young people are going to do, and I don't know if any of you guys are parents or not, but the child's job is to push the boundaries that you set up as a parent. That is part of the growing up process, the struggle between the child and the parent. Okay. This gives a parent an opportunity to educate their children, not just about cannabis, but about caffeine, but about alcohol.
What about sugar?
Opioids. Oh, we can actually have conversations with our children now. We don't have to hide the fact that we're closet stoners or closet users. We bring it out.
You're
can
exactly
we just
right.
talk about it, please?
Yep.
And then look at the facts now, because science and research is there. Not just on cannabis. It's there in caffeine. It's there in a lot of different things, So this is an opportunity for over 21-year-old parents to talk with their children about adult products. And what is the difference between a child and an adult? Why do they put these age limits on it? And automatically, are you mature enough when the calendar says that you're 21 years old and now you're able to go out and drink and smoke? Are you going to tell me that most of 21-year-olds have never tried it, have never had a sip of beer? Come on, people.
Give me a break.
Right?
Exactly.
Don't touch the stove. It's hot. Right? Right?
That's right.
What do? I did it at age 7. Oh, I want to see what that feels like. What's hot? Whoa, that's hot. Now I know what hot is. Holy mackerel, right?
Jimmy, we really appreciate you coming on. I got one more question. We're Vote Pro Pot, so we do a lot of political stuff. Let me get your take on this. We all know that 2/3 of Americans now, when polled, are for the legalization of adult use cannabis, approximately, give or take, right?
Yep.
And over 90% are in favor of medical.
Right. So the question is, and this question I'm proposing to you, does that matter? And what I mean by that is most people aren't single issue voters. So if 2/3 of the adult population, voting population is pro, does that matter when they go into the ballot box?
Unless you're in the ballot box with each individual, none of us really know. You could go into that. You could be, stomping for different campaign issues and people and, out in public and all this. And then you get behind that curtain, right? Yeah. And it's still up to you what you put down. No one's going to know but you. Now you got to live with it. Okay. But, it concerns me. It really does concern me about it. I'd like to think that we are a true democracy, but we're not. We're a republic. And herein lies another issue that cannabis is right in the middle of. Unfortunately, our politicians are more concerned about their own agendas rather than taking a step back and saying, you know what, let's figure out how we can make the world a better place and listen to our constituents and do our own jobs as opposed to fulfilling our political initiatives. And it's one of the reasons why I don't like politics. I just don't. And by the way, are we a true democracy? I know in my lifetime, we've put 2 people in the White House who have won the electoral votes, but not the popular vote. That, to me, is
more than
wrong. 2. More than right. Well, certainly
in your lifetime, at least.
In my lifetime. But I mean, and I think that do we really need the Electoral College now? Really? Because that was designed back in the days. I really don't think we do anymore. I just don't. I'm sorry.
Well, that's a topic for a separate show, brother.
That's a whole show.
Another topic for another day. Well, Jimmy, we sure are. We're sure glad to have you today, and thank you for taking the time. Tell us once again where to find you, real quick.
Well, first of all, you can get In the Weeds with Jimmy Young, my podcast, on iTunes and Spotify and all that. And I've got to tell you, you guys are up. What episode are we on for you guys?
83?
We are 83, I think. Yeah.
I think I've got something like 130 up there. Wow. And there's all sorts of interviews that I've done with doctors and lawyers and, survivors, and everybody has a cannabis story. And that's why I started this company, because I want to tell the story of the cannabis universe through their own words. So in other words, I'm about to start a crowdfunding campaign to build a live streaming TV studio for the cannabis industry, so that they don't have to fear going into a ABC affiliate or a CBS affiliate and being put on the defensive. I want you in the chair to tell me your story. There's so many great, compelling stories out there about the effect that this medicine has had on people's lives. I want to hear those stories. And that's what we do. And that's what I do both on the podcast and on the video podcast and the, talk shows that we do live. And, I've been very fortunate to meet some of the biggest names now in the industry. And I hopefully will continue to do that. And I'm going to be out at MJ BizCon. Because everybody in the world's there, and I can't wait to get out there and see some old friends of mine out there too. So.
Excellent.
Well, Jimmy, we're looking forward to spending more time with you in the future. We got to do this again. I definitely want to follow what's going on with cannabis and sports. I'm really concerned that the professional beach volleyball players get their share.
And make sure you keep us in the loop. We love coming on your show. Anytime you need us for anything, Jimmy, we're there.
And we will put your links up on our show description so our listeners can check you out as well.
Yeah, and I look forward to actually meeting you guys face-to-face someday. I am planning on a trip to D.C. around the holidays, so I'll be looking you up.
Well, we all have a face for radio, brother, so just to warn you.
Okay, fair enough. I'll take my face. Thankfully, I've still got the looks, because that's about all I got left now. My voice and my looks.
Well, and a pretty impressive resume, so let's add that.
Guys.
All right, let's hear you say one time, go Redskins.
All right, good luck for you. Good luck to you.
No, don't make him do that.
Can you get rid of Trump and Snyder at the same time? Can we make it sorry.
There you go, I'm for that.
I don't think we can impeach Snyder. That's the problem. Take care, Jimmy.
You bet. Take care, guys.
Now, if you go on to VoteProPot.com, you will see we have mugs for sale, and they're very attractive.
Get your mug.
And honestly, the coffee tastes so much better from these mugs.
As does bourbon.
Especially if you're hanging out at a cannabis cafe somewhere. And it helps the cause. So help us out, buy a mug, and, enjoy the fruits of your labor. We sure did enjoy having Jimmy Young with us today, and we do hope you enjoyed this episode of Vote Pro Podcast. If you did, please do us a favor, go on Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star rating. Share us with somebody you know.
Send us an email at podcast@votepropot.com. Call our message line 240-257-2441. Leave a message and we'll play on the show.
And there's so much going on in the world of cannabis every week that there's no way we can even scratch the surface on the podcast. So we share a lot of information on our social networking sites. So please go to Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter and do a search for Vote Pro Pot.
Lock me up, find me good, label me a menace to your quiet neighborhood. I don't grow no plants, the state says I can't. That's not freedom, freedom, freedom. That's the point. Smoke a bowl, I roll a joint. Do what I want, if I hurt nobody, that's the point. And if I wanna get high, why shouldn't I? That's not freedom, freedom, freedom. That's the point. Decide what's best for you and me. Smoke a bowl or roll a joint. Do what you want, if it hurts nobody, that's the point. So let's get high, yeah, you and I. It's called freedom, freedom. It's called freedom. That's the point.